I found out my parents were charging me rent the same day. I found out they'd spent my entire college fund on a luxury cruise and a new SUV they didn't need. And honestly, I'm still shaking while I type this because I need to know if I'm the monster for what I did next. I'm 17 years old, working 2 jobs while trying to finish my senior year of high school, and my own flesh and blood essentially turned me into their personal ATM while they lived like royalty on my dime. Was I wrong for completely cutting them off and leaving them to face the debt collectors alone? Or would you have done the exact same thing if you realized your childhood was being auctioned off to pay for your parents' midlife crisis? I need you to listen to the whole story before you judge me, because what started as a lesson in responsibility turned into a level of betrayal that I don't think I can ever forgive. My name is Leo, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a pretty normal, supportive family. My dad works in middle management, and my mom does freelance design. Or at least that's what she told me. We live in a decent suburb, nothing too flashy, and I was always raised with the idea that if I wanted extra things, a better gaming PC, cool clothes, or a car, I had to work for it. I didn't mind that. In fact, I started mowing lawns when I was 12 and got a job at a local diner the second I turned 15. I've always been a saver. While my friends were out spending their weekend paychecks on sneakers and fast food, I was putting 70% of everything I made into a high-yield savings account that my parents helped me set up. They told me they were so proud of my work ethic. My dad would literally pat me on the back every Sunday when I showed him my updated balance, telling me that this money, combined with the college fund they had been building for me since I was born, would mean I'd graduate debt-free. That was the dream they sold me. That dream started to rot back in June. It began with small comments. My mom started complaining about how expensive groceries were getting, and how the utility bills were astronomical because I liked to study with the lights on late at night. One evening during dinner, my dad dropped the bombshell. He told me that since I was nearly an adult and making adult money at the diner and my second job at the warehouse, it was time I started contributing to the household. I thought he meant maybe $50 a week for food. No. He handed me a typed-out invoice. They wanted $800 a month. I'm 17. I'm a student. I told them that was more than half my monthly income, and it would take away from my savings. My dad just looked at me with this cold, robotic expression and said that life isn't free, and if I didn't like it, I could see how much a studio apartment cost in the city. I was devastated, but I loved them, and I thought maybe they were genuinely struggling. So I paid. For 3 months, I handed over $800. But then the bills started growing. Suddenly the car insurance went up, and they needed another $200. Then the water heater broke, and they asked me to cover the repair. I was exhausted, working 40 hours a week on top of AP classes, coming home exhausted just to be met with my mom asking if I'd received my paycheck yet. I remember one specific night where I was studying for a calculus midterm until 3 a.m. after a double shift at the diner. My feet were throbbing, my head was spinning, and I was surviving on black coffee and granola bars. My dad walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, saw me there, and didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask about the test. He looked at the kitchen light and said, "You know every hour that bulb is on is money coming out of my pocket, right? Hope you've got that extra 50 for the electric bill ready on Friday." It was like I wasn't his son anymore. I was just a tenant he barely tolerated. The weird part was, while I was drowning, they seemed to be thriving. My dad came home with a brand new Silverado, all chrome and leather, and my mom suddenly had a closet full of designer bags. They started going out to networking dinners 4 times a week. When I asked how they could afford all that if we were so broke I had to pay for the literal water I used to shower, they told me it was none of my business, and that they managed their money better than I did. I started noticing other things too. Small packages arriving every day, expensive watches, high-end skincare sets, even a new state-of-the-art espresso machine. When I asked why I was paying rent while they were living like influencers, my mom would just laugh and say it was rewards points, or early inheritance gifts to themselves. The gaslighting was so intense I started to believe I was the one being selfish for even questioning them. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a ghost that was expected to provide a steady stream of cash. I started skipping lunch at school to save an extra $5 a day, because I was terrified of what would happen if I fell short on their invoice. The breaking point came last Tuesday. I was planning my college applications, and I wanted to see exactly how much was in that promised college fund, so I knew which schools were realistic. I had my heart set on a top-tier engineering program, and I'd been told for years that the money was sitting there, waiting for me. Since the account was in my name but managed by them, I had to go to the bank to get access. I walked in there feeling hopeful, maybe even a little proud of what my family had built together. When the teller pulled up the records, her entire demeanor changed. She gave me this look of pure pity, the kind of look you give someone right before you tell them their dog died. The account was empty. Not just empty, it had been closed 3 months ago. Over $40,000 gone. Every single birthday check from my grandma, every Christmas gift, and the matching contributions my parents claimed they were making had vanished. I asked for the withdrawal history, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the pen to sign the request. Every single cent had been moved into my father's personal checking account in large chunks, mostly coinciding with the down payment on that truck and a second honeymoon cruise they took while I stayed home to work. I felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. I sat on a bench outside the bank for 2 hours, just staring at the traffic, feeling the most profound sense of isolation I've ever known. I went home in a daze, but I didn't confront them immediately. I knew if I did, they would just lie and spin it into me being ungrateful. I waited. I went into their home office while they were out at a fancy steakhouse, paid for by me probably, and I started digging through the mail. I found a folder hidden in the back of a filing cabinet, buried under old tax returns. It wasn't just my college fund they'd spent. They had massive credit card debt, over $80,000 of it. They weren't struggling because of the economy. They were struggling because they were addicted to a lifestyle they couldn't afford, and they were using me as a subsidized loan to keep the ship from sinking. They had even forged my signature on a document to gift my dad the money from my savings account. I found a notebook where my mom had literally calculated how much they could squeeze out of me each month based on my average tips at the diner. They had gamified my exploitation. I sat there in the dark, clutching those papers, realizing that my parents didn't see me as a son. They saw me as a financial lifeboat they were willing to puncture just to stay dry for another month. So that's the situation I was in. I was 17, betrayed, broke, and realized my future had been stolen to pay for my dad's truck and my mom's vanity. Before I tell you how I burned their perfect little world down, I want you to pause right now and comment below. If you found out your parents stole $40,000 from your future while charging you rent, what would you do? Would you stay and try to work it out because they're family? Or would you go nuclear and demand justice? I chose to go nuclear. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even let them see I was upset. I waited until the next morning when they were both in the kitchen, sipping expensive espresso from that machine my labor had paid for. I placed the bank statements, the debt logs, and the forged documents on the table right next to their breakfast. The silence was deafening. My mom tried to fake cry, doing that dramatic hand-to-forehead thing she does, saying they intended to pay it back, and that they were protecting me from the burden of knowing. My dad took a different route. He had the audacity to get angry, his face turning a deep purple as he shouted about how I had no right to go through their files. He told me that as long as I lived under his roof, my money was his money, and that I owed them for 17 years of food and shelter. He actually said I was indebted to them for the cost of my own childhood. That was the last mistake he ever made with me. See, what they forgot is that my uncle, my mom's brother David, is a high-profile real estate attorney who absolutely loathes my father. Uncle David has always seen through my dad's big shot act. I left the house that morning, drove straight to my uncle's office, and showed him everything. He was horrified. He didn't just see a family dispute, he saw a criminal case. He told me that what they did wasn't just bad parenting. It was straight-up identity theft and financial fraud since I was still a minor, and the account was a custodial one. The forgery was the nail in the coffin. With his help, I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank that they had no access to. I moved my remaining $300 there. Then, I went to the diner and asked my boss if I could pick up every single shift available, explaining the situation. My boss, who has kids my age, was so disgusted he offered me the extra storage room in the back of the restaurant to stay in if I needed a place to hide. I didn't go home for 3 days. I stayed at my uncle's. During those 3 days, the rent was due. My dad sent me 27 frantic texts and called me 50 times. He needed my $800 to make the truck payment, and the minimum on 3 different cards. When I finally answered, I didn't engage in the drama. I told him I wasn't paying another dime. I told him I had already filed a police report for the stolen college fund and the forged signatures. The panic in his voice was the best thing I'd heard in years. He started begging, saying they'd lose the car and the house would go into foreclosure within the month. I told him he should have thought about that before he treated his son like a revolving credit line. My uncle helped me file for legal emancipation, and since I could prove I was self-sufficient and that my parents were financially abusive, the process moved fast. But the real revenge was systemic. I contacted the credit card companies and the bank. I provided the evidence that I had not authorized the use of my name or funds for their debts. The bank opened an internal investigation into the gift transfer, and because my uncle knows the branch manager, they fast-tracked it. They ended up freezing my dad's accounts because of the suspected fraud. Without my rent money and with their accounts frozen, the house of cards collapsed with a deafening crash. The SUV was repossessed 2 weeks later, right in front of the neighbors. My mom had to sell all her designer bags on a resale site just to buy groceries. They had to list the house for a short sale and move into a cramped, moldy 2-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town where the elevators don't work. They tried to tell the rest of the family that I was a heartless child who turned his back on them in their time of need, but my uncle sent a mass email to the entire extended family with scans of the forged signatures. The silence from the rest of the family was the loudest "I told you so" ever recorded. My grandma, who had contributed most of that college fund, was so livid she actually cut my mother out of her will on the spot. Now my parents are facing a massive civil suit to pay me back every cent of that $40,000 plus interest, even if it takes them the rest of their lives. I'm currently living with my uncle, finishing school, and I've already been accepted into a great university with a full-ride scholarship, something I earned on my own, through merit and grit, without a cent of the money they stole. My parents keep trying to reach out. They send these long, rambling emails about family values and how they're suffering because of my choices. They are dead to me. They call me every week crying about how they're going to be homeless, but I just block the new numbers. I realize that being family doesn't give you a license to steal someone's future or treat them like a commodity. I'm starting my life over at 18 with nothing but my pride, my work ethic, and a very clear understanding of who I can trust. I've spent months rebuilding my mental health, realizing that the exhaustion I felt wasn't just from the long hours at the diner. It was the weight of carrying 2 adults who refused to grow up. Looking back, I realized that the lesson in responsibility they wanted to teach me actually worked. It taught me that I'm responsible for my own happiness, and that doesn't include sacrificing my life to fund someone else's delusion. I learned that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty, honesty, and respect do. If you think I did the right thing by letting them lose everything and protecting my future, like this video and let me know in the comments. It's been a long, painful road to get here, and I'm still processing the fact that the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones I needed protection from most. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far by involving the law? Or did they get exactly what they deserved for trying to steal my life before it even started? I'll see you all in the next story.